All right. How's it going, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. Man, it was really cool to hop on the private server and just see everybody mashing out some games. It's been a while, man. That was fun. What's up on her, North Star? Simply Mary, Ezra. How's it going, everybody? All right. Let me get some tunes going in the background. Cool. All right, so thanks for joining me today. I just wanted to do this after the whole private server send-off thing. I didn't know what the context of that was going to be. I thought they were going to have like a presentation or something. I didn't know what to expect, but it was cool to see all the games and like the wacky situations they set up. The all Granny, all Sven, 10v10, that was dope. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give my own thoughts about the private server and actually show something that I had worked on thanks to the private server. So I don't know how to position this. I've been thinking about it, going back and forth and stuff, so I'm just gonna rant about it. The private server had a lot of importance for me and for Gigantic in general, and I think the private server just existing and having a community there enabled Rampage Edition to become a thing. If the community had been dispersed and just like shattered to the wind, we wouldn't have been able to get some of the activations that we had when I was working at Perfect World and Gearbox. And it was cool that like the dream still was kept alive because of the private server. So everybody who is going to be playing Rampage Edition owes a lot of thanks to the private server, myself included. So, that whole team that set everything up and had done all the management and just like all the crazy stuff that they have done over the years, under the cover of darkness, trying to stay quiet and trying to stay legal and trying not to get in trouble, and still being able to organize and pull people together and bring new people in and introduce people to Gigantic, and just like all the work they had put in, I don't think it really gets acknowledged. And so that's the first thing I want to say is thank you to all of you who were on the private server, everybody who played, everybody who managed it. Like Gigantic Rampage Edition seriously would not exist without all of those folks. So that's really cool. And I'm happy to have been part of the server in some regard, even though I feel like there was a bit of a conflict of interest for me if I were to hop on and play at any point. So I wouldn't have been able to play even if I wanted to, which I really did. But it's nice to be able to see people like sharing clips and things and still keeping their knowledge up about the game. And all that stuff is going to translate really well to Rampage Edition, which is cool because now we have people who are still like familiar with the experience and who can help teach other players and who understand the meta and understand the heroes and stuff. And so just having higher quality players advances the entire community because then other people can learn from you. And yeah, it's just awesome seeing all that stuff. It was like 2.5 years. Yeah, that's good to hear, Mad Buns. I'm happy to hear that. Throwback events saved us. Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing, Simply Mary, is just like being able to meet and connect with all these people who have similar likes and goals to you and just want to, hop in and play Gigantic because the core experience is so fun. But the real point of this is that there was a community roundtable that I did back in, I think it was 21. It was like, yeah, about November something, 2021. And that was, that kind of sparked what came of Rampage Edition. And so I had a great opportunity to be able to pull a bunch of people in. There were like 300 or 400 people on the server at one time. And many people were able to ask questions and we were just talking and hanging out. And I think it caused a lot of visibility for Gigantic. And that was like a really fun thing, like an opportunity that happened. Oh, Blend Burner. Hey, thanks for the subscription. Appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm going to be streaming a lot once the game actually launches, this upcoming week. And I want to start doing events and tournaments and stuff. I know everybody's going to be streaming and making content on YouTube and stuff. And I got some fun idea. Actually, because we're talking about that right now, just a sec. Hold on. Oh, actually, I have one right here. Check this out. I saw this get posted on Reddit recently. And this is a Perfect World medal or like a badge or a something. Let's see. Can we get that on camera? I don't want to take it out of the wrapper just in case I give it to somebody. But it's Taito and Fang. And oh, there we go, kind of. Yeah, it's really cool. It's heavy. It's like made of metal. I have a bag of these. I have like 30 of them. So I want to find ways to give these away. I think I can just put them in like a letter and send them. It won't cost me too much, hopefully, other than like a postage stamp. But I have so many of these things sitting around, and they're so cool. So I don't know, maybe I'll be able to donate these to tournaments or something, or events, and be able to kind of share these. But oh, also, actually, let me show you the back of it too before I put it away. It says Perfect World on it, which is now defunct, Perfect World Entertainment. And it's like a big coin. Yeah, it's heavy too. It's really cool. It's got some nice colors on there. It says Gigantic launch December 8th, 2016. Power to the Clash. And then Perfect World on the back, it says Play brings us together. It's nice. So yeah, I want to see about, well, Perfect World Entertainment is no longer a thing. They're now Gearbox Publishing, and possibly going to be something else because of recent developments. But yeah, that aside, I'm glad I remembered that. I don't remember what jostled my memory, but that was cool. But yeah, the private server meant a lot. And we had this community roundtable event where people were able to ask questions. And primarily, I came out and I was like, what are the things that, why are the reasons that you think Gigantic failed? What are the things you love about it? What are the things that could be improved? And so that little like 2 hour or 3 hour segment that we did on the private server was responsible for the evolution of Gigantic Rampage Edition. So after that happened, basically over winter break, right, my Christmas break, I sat down on my own time and I started putting together a deck to pitch to the people at Perfect World at the time, now Gearbox. And so I spent a lot of my own personal time doing something based on the information that I compiled from, well, a little bit of my own observations, but a lot of what we got out of that roundtable. So here, actually, I found the playlist for the roundtable. I'm going to go ahead and put that in chat here. If anybody is interested in checking that out, there it is. Zimbims fortunately archived this, so thank you, Zimbims, for doing that. I don't think it's long and it's kind of slow and it's a lot of like droning on and talking. And I think it's still important to be able to archive these things because I like historical information and, you know, seeing where we came from and comparing that to where we're going. And I think that is a good enough segue for me to go and show the deck that I put together. Now, I have to preface this again over and over. I need to make this very clear that what I'm showing here is what I made in my own spare time. This was not an ask from any of my professional work references or bosses or anything. This was not something that was an ask of me from Perfect World or Gearbox. This is something that I put together my own time. And what became of this, it like changed and went through all these different iterations. And before this deck, I had 2 other ones that I was also putting together in my own time that had multiple revisions going back and forth, different stages of the game. The first one of these that I did was while the game was still alive, trying to find ways to save it. Second one I did was a little bit later on after the game had already shut down, trying to find opportunities to revive Gigantic in some sense. There were a lot of interesting developments. Actually, I know that the private server had access to different builds, and I understand that there were other builds that they chose not to use, probably for the better. But there was a lot of things happening for Gigantic in the background. And then we get to this point where we did the community roundtable, and I was just feeling so hype coming out of that, and I had all this great information. I had taken so many notes, pages and pages of notes, and so I thought I have to put this into a way that I could present this and show this to people. And so that's essentially what this is. It's like, how would I be able to communicate the things that all of you told me if I were to pitch this to a game studio? And so that's what I did here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this deck. I've talked about this a couple times before. And again, I have to say just the legalese, this is something that I did in my own time. The actual one that Gearbox may or may not have used going forward is something completely different. But this is on my own personal account and everything. I established this in my own time. So, all right, let's take a look. Does this work? Yes, it does. Cool. I got a little pen here, and I can highlight things. So, what do we got? Now, you all know that I'm very passionate about Gigantic, and I understand that all of you are as well. And the whole idea of putting this deck together was that I wanted to revive Gigantic. Before I get too far into this, actually, let me stop for another moment and say, I don't know if, I'm just going to rant about this stuff. I'm probably going to talk a little bit about the presentation and about some background and things. And so, you know, all of you are watching this because you love Gigantic too. So just give me your history, give me your thoughts and ideas. I think a lot of this I probably misrepresented. And this is from like 2022, you know, like 2 years ago. We're already in 2024. Gigantic Rampage Edition coming out. And this was old SoFetch. I've learned a lot since I did this the next time. I've done so many more decks in the coming years. So however this is interpreted, or how this goes, it's an old article of the past, an artifact. So yeah, Operation Revive Gigantic. I tried doing this many times over the years, and I made multiple versions. And I would constantly be bringing it up and constantly pitching it to new people and constantly sharing ideas and talking to people who had played Gigantic with me, like old developers and all of you, and then people that I had worked with. And I think a lot of people knew that this was possible. We just didn't know how to go about doing it. So, next slide, unfortunately redacted. I think that this is important to keep in because there are very clear business goals anytime you're going to be doing something like this. And while I had to remove most of the numbers from this deck, we can't really show any of these things. And even if I were to show this, I don't know if those numbers are still accurate or whatever, but you have to understand that we thought about ways to just be able to bring Gigantic back and just like put it in front of you and just be like, here's the game, just do whatever you want with it, dump the source, make a standalone version, do things like that, let people be able to play the game in some capacity. But it's just not financially feasible, and there's a lot of legal work that you have to go through, a lot of contracts you have to sign, and it's just more complicated than that. So I think especially like looking at what we've got currently with Rampage Edition, they're charging $20 for it. There's a lot of chatter about that on the Discords, and I think $20 is perfectly reasonable for the package that you're getting. But that also says that the game is not a live service title to me, that they're not going to be adding anything more in the future. But I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think that for a game like Gigantic, at least being able to hop in and play for a little bit, having the devs recoup their cost, and just being able to play the game for a short while, at least, that's good enough for me. I think that's fun. That gives us what we want, official servers, and that's just the way it is. You can't expect live service titles to be able to succeed in the modern market either. All right, on to the next one. So this is like a title slide. We're going to be getting into the sentiment. Now, I've got a bunch of stuff that I had from a long time ago that I had used in many different slides and many different presentations and stuff, and all of this is public, so you can just go out to Metacritic and be able to find this meta score. So I don't know if you all care about these things, but I think it's really interesting, and I'm fascinated by marketing and the process that goes into Gigantic on the back end and just like making video games. So maybe you didn't know, or maybe you had a different thought about this, but in general, when the game first released, it only got a 76. And that is not so great. That is not necessarily bad in the game industry, but you want to be at like 78 plus, I think is what the number is, because then on Steam, you're like overwhelmingly positive. You want to be overwhelmingly positive on Steam, you don't want to be very positive. So you have to get up to that number. And here in our user review score, 84, that's pretty good. You want to be in the 80s generally for any game. 70, this is like a C, right? we don't think Gigantic was a C, but the reviewers unfortunately think it was. And yeah, on her, I mean, we think that they're a joke now, but this is still important. And a lot of people still go to review sites. I think just like Discord and Twitter and Reddit have kind of taken that over, and YouTube, people make YouTube videos that maybe hold more water to you than they would to other people, but still there's a set of people who still go to like IGN and GameSpot for their opinions. And still, even though these are old, this is still, 2017 is when these were written. Even in the modern age, review sites are still hold some kind of importance for them. And yeah, like Psycho says, businesses definitely care about these. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Like GameSpot and Polygon gave us 80s. That's too bad. And then most of these are the top two, and then everything else was a lot lower than that. So that kind of brought our score down quite a bit. But regarding a few of those points, like they thought it had a great gameplay foundation, and I think that's listed a few times, but it lacked the content to keep people coming back. And we all know the core loop of the game is so dope. It's so fun to just hop in and play, but there's just all these little things that weren't in the original release of Gigantic that actually I think they've been able to address for Rampage Edition. And I think I have a lot of that stuff in here later. One point I want to make about this is the likable character designs, colorful art style, visually appealing. Something that one of the developers told me, and that I had come to learn over my time in the game industry and talking with people, is that the Asian market really doesn't like the way that the Gigantic characters look because they're awkward shapes. And so it's hard to break into Asia with this game, which would be a massive market for us, especially in the MOBA and hero shooter genre. So that sucks. We all probably think the characters are cool. I like the weird shapes, but I guess over there they want anime characters. So, that's just the nature of the beast. Every region is looking for something different. Every player is looking for something different. And these players gave us a 76 on average. Sucks, man. So I love this. Yeah, you can see some of the dates on this too. Like, here we go, November 14, 21. So this one in January was in 2022. And all of these are like people so hype on the game, so sad that it's gone. Bring it back, please. Better than Overwatch. Never forgotten. Miss you, old friend. A couple of these guys, like this one has 500 hours. There's a few like 100 here, almost 800 hours. And then this one guy here, just sad that it doesn't want to start. 0.1 hours. All right, guy. Sorry. Well, hopefully soon this will flip upside down and be like the rest of them. But it's just crazy that years after the game had shut down, people were still going to the Steam store page, which is delisted on Steam. You can find it on Google, I think, but I don't think you can even find it on Steam. They were going to the Steam store page and still trying to launch the game, seeing what happened, seeing if there were updates, making these comments. And man, just seeing that stuff all the time made me so happy, especially on the YouTube, because of the way the YouTube algorithm works. People would go and watch the video. Like, it just takes a few people to watch it, and then it starts getting fed to people. And I would just go and read the comments, and there'd be huge bursts of things, right? Where it would just be a ton of people who come back and start commenting on a video all of a sudden because it got fed to them. And that's still happening. It's so cool. And Gigantic is just kind of that it has that virality to it, where people remember it fondly, and you just want to do something cool. You want to see something cool about the game, and then you go and you start falling down that rabbit hole and seeing all these videos, and like people would get fed the Shammy video too, and then see that, and it would go down. It's just crazy. Super cool that all this stuff happened. And so if you're on here, I had to remove the names, but if you're on here, shout outs to you for going to that Steam store page and putting your comments on there. All right, community programs. So you may recognize this one. A very long time ago, I did a call to action, and fortunately, it was a smash hit. I just wanted to get a few people onto a server so I could get a screenshot and be like, hey, look at all the people that are still on the private server. And then like an insane amount of people showed up. We capped the server at one point. I didn't get a screenshot of that, but I was able to use this over the years to say, like, look at what the community has created. Look at how cool this is. Having daily matches, fan organized. I had to continuously bring up the illegal core build part of it because this is something that is not publicly available. Like, you guys wanted this so bad that you would risk an DMCA to be able to play Gigantic just for a little bit longer. And so that was pretty cool, and I was able to make a slide about this, and maybe we fudged the numbers a little bit. It wasn't always like this, but it was still cool to see everybody coming out and all the awesome names here. So yeah, if you were part of this, thank you for that, because that definitely gave us a little bit of ammo. And then, of course, Project Stamina, which is no longer, but it's like uncanny looking at this. So one of these images is not like the other. The middle one here is Gigantic, and then the other ones are Project Stamina, and it's strikingly similar. They were able to make something that is so like Gigantic, and instead of being able to put their resources together and create something that was for them like unique, special, different, they love Gigantic so much, and they wanted that experience that they made this. They made a spiritual successor to the game in their own time with their own money. And that's something that I know a lot of people tried, and shout outs to them. I know none of them really ever got off the ground, unfortunately, but well, those projects and those efforts were definitely seen, and it was able to give us even more ammo to push for Gigantic coming back. All right, now we're getting into the wild shit. So a lot of the stuff from here were things that I took from that roundtable that I had mentioned before. A lot of people came through and provided their feedback, and I'm always lurking. I'm always reading everything that's going on the Discord, even if I'm not commenting. But anytime I'm online, I'm pretty much like looking at things that are on Discord to see what people think and to understand the player perspective. I think that's really important. And unfortunately, a lot of community managers don't do that. A lot of game developers don't do that. They're kind of heads down. They're doing their own thing. But I always felt like it was my responsibility as a community manager in the game industry to be able to effectively communicate how the players think and how they feel to the developers and to the marketing team. So I try that as best I can. And these are some of the things that I came up with. Now, this first slide is all me. So people often say like, oh, it was a bad marketing that killed the game. Oh, it was that the game was free to play, and oh, there wasn't any monetization, and oh, the game was too hard, or oh, there were too many Smurfs, or whatever. But this here encompasses what I think is the primary reason for why Gigantic failed. And I hope I broke this down pretty easy, but here, I'll show you guys this. And I've mentioned this before many times, and I really feel like this is one of the biggest reasons why Gigantic didn't find its footing the first time around. So Gigantic here, we're at the top. So in order of release from open beta and launch, Paragon came out in March-ish of 2016, right? Look at when we launched, July of 2017. So Paragon was already out. Battleborn, about the same time, they had an open beta. They launched in May. Overwatch also launched in May 2016. It's Amani's fault, yeah. Well, that's certainly the problem. She shot us in the foot. But you can see that some of the big competitors here, Paragon, Battleborn, Overwatch, even Paladins, releasing an open beta in September of 2016, launched way before we did. And then we had, actually, I think even before then, before I even started working for Motiga, I got hired here in October of 2016. So even before this point, in like January or February, there was another false start for Gigantic, where there was an open beta and they released Paco and then they shut it down afterward. And I think that's about the time where they ran out of money and Perfect World picked them up in this area somewhere. So like, imagine if that would not have happened, if they would have been able to launch here, then we would have beat everybody to the punch. But unfortunately, because of delays and everything else, you know, we didn't even hit our first soft launch until December of 2016 on Xbox One and Windows 10. And that sucked because then we had to launch again on Arc in June. And then we had to launch again on Steam in July. And it was just too many launches, and it was too much for media to pick up instead of just having one condensed launch. That sucks, you know? We had all these false starts over the years. And also, I think internally we considered Arc our primary 1.0 launch because when we kind of went dark in this area. There were some pretty big creature changes during this time, and so Ark was kind of like our 1.0. But then when Steam hit, we launched Ramsey, and so that was like the first character release. But this was kind of our 1.0. We didn't communicate that effectively because we were waiting for Steam to put the budget and everything. So yeah, it was just kind of a mess. There were just too many conflicting events here that made it difficult for us to be able to effectively communicate that the game was actually out. But still, I digress. Paladins here, and then like Lawbreakers, this is maybe it's not coming through so well, but this is a cream color and these two are white. But Lawbreakers, hero shooter-esque, still beat us to the punch. And then we get here to PUBG, which is the Battle Royale game started hitting the market. And I remember being at Motiga, I was here, and then I kind of went to Perfect World around here or here. But at Motiga, everybody started playing PUBG, and it was like the big hit, and it was just popping off on streams, and we felt like there was something coming. You know, you can kind of see that new wave of the new hotness coming through. And so PUBG hit, and then of course later on Fortnite Battle Royale hit, which I think was late August or maybe even early September, but I still had to squeeze it on here. So we were already in the midst of the Battle Royale craze before we even hit our 1.0 on PC. So that sucks, man. Bad timing. All right. Next thing. A lot of other things happened with the game, and I have slides to address those. Here's something I don't see talked about much, and you guys don't have access to the data. I don't expect you to really even have considered this, but because you only go through this once, but there were a lot of problems in onboarding new players. So it's called a new user experience, an NUE. So each of these green blocks, I put this together as well. Each of these green blocks identifies one of like the big checks. And then all the other things are little points that you have to get through. So first you go game lobby, then you have to play tutorial, then you have to go through a bot match, and then finally you can play 5v5 against real players, right? Oh, thanks, Onher. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming through. It's good to have you here. So on each of these points, like you have to install, you have to launch, you have to sign in, you have to get to the home screen, and then it takes you to the lobby. And then going through the tutorial, there are each one of these things. A long intro, you have to do Power Race, you have to do Rampage, you have to do the Focus tutorial. And then, after that's over, you have to play a bot match. You have to get through Hero Select, you have to queue, you have to accept the queue, which a lot of people wouldn't do, they wouldn't see it or it would break. You have to go through Hero Confirm, you play the match, you complete it. You have to reach level 2, which sometimes mean you have to do this whole thing again. And then you have to go through this again before you can actually play with other players. So this was a big problem because there were just too many steps and too many failure points to get you into playing the actual game, right? Having to watch a minimum 10 hours of Ring Out gaming tutorial videos. Yes, you have to watch at least 10 hours of Ring Out videos before you can even before you can even install Gigantic. You have to know. All right, so another one, speaking of new user experience, Redacted. I can't show you guys the numbers, but this is a tool that we had at Motiga. This is very old, that hit all those checks. And so you can see Arc, Steam, Windows 10, Xbox. We were able to see each of those. And here's all of the different failure points that you could possibly run into. So we were able to see the percentages of people that would come in. So of course, this first one was always 100%. And I don't remember the numbers exactly. It's redacted, but I have red lines here to say bot match, regular match, and each one of these, yes, it should be on a VOD. I'm pretty sure that I have VOD set up. And each one of these was like a point where the players had to meet before they could even play a regular match against real players. So around this area somewhere, there was a huge drop off. And this area just happens to be intro tutorial, Power Race tutorial, Rampage tutorial, Focus tutorial, Complete tutorial. So it was just like people weren't getting through the tutorial. They were getting bored of it and they wouldn't want to continue through, and the tutorial was mandatory, and that sucks. But also something else to consider is that there were a lot of crashes, especially early on, and people would get stuck on some of these points and the game would just crash and they'd be like, okay, it's a free to play game. All I invested was time downloading. I'm just going to uninstall and I'm going to leave. So at any one of these points, whether they would get bored or the game would crash, people just wouldn't come back. So Again, I don't remember what the numbers were, but even losing like 10% of players over the course of this sucks, because it's a free-to-play game. We're competing for their time. We're competing for their money. They can go somewhere else and do whatever they want to. Yeah, Rucker update. That sucked too. That was a little bit later, but some of the updates particularly were had major performance issues. And we also had some times where there were like extended downtimes, and that also really sucked, because then we pushed marketing beats and then we had an extended downtime. So just like a lot of stuff like that happened. All right, and on the next one, Redacted. But this is another tool that we had to show retention. So I don't know if you guys know too much about retention or if you even think it's fun, but I'm very fascinated with this. I think it's a really cool stuff to talk about. So retention in a free-to-play game, the general idea for this in just like anything free-to-play is the 40-20-10 rule. So we call this is like retention 1. You call that D1, that's day 1. So people who come back the second day. D7, they come back after a week. 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, right? So the 40-20-10 is day 1, day 7, and day 30. So you want it to be 40% of people who play on the first day come back again. And then after that, it's 20% of people are still there after a week, and then 10% of people are still there after a month. And that's something that's like considered sustainable for a free-to-play game. I haven't worked on a free-to-play game since Magic Legends, so I think that has changed, especially since the market's changed so much. But generally, I've been reading more recently that most games run about 5% day 7 retention. And so what we were looking for here was 20, you know? And well, you can see we didn't even meet the 40 of day 1 because it doesn't go up to 40. But I understand like most of the top games now are getting 10% day 7 retention, which was not good back then. And that doesn't sound very good now. And we were not anywhere near that, unfortunately. It was much lower. And that sucks. Like people, you could see the Steam numbers, right? You could go to Steam charts and look this game up and see what it was like, and you could see massive fall off. And that's really too bad, because that was just Steam. I mean, this was also just Steam, but that doesn't account for Arc, which had a smaller player base in the first place and had a lot of other external issues like crashing and account issues and things like that. And then of course Xbox, which had a lot of its own problems, which I think I address here in a little bit. And then Windows 10, which was just a nightmare. That was a mess. So retention, unfortunately, not great. There are things that you can do to improve that, and there are things that we definitely tried to do to improve that, one of which were Ruby stipends. The marketing team at Perfect World thought it would be cool to give out lots of rubies. So we had all these different ways that we were trying to be clever with giving out rubies, like community events, like, oh, capture so much power in a week, capture 10 million power in a week or something, and we'll give every player 200 rubies. And we would do fun things like that. And the ruby retention we found just didn't work. Yeah, grinding your rubies and playing every day and stuff like that. There were like endemic ruby retention mechanisms, but we were trying to find other ways to get people back through marketing means, and it unfortunately just didn't work. For the most part, a free-to-play game, once you play and you decide you don't like it for whatever reason, it's very unlikely that you're going to come back. So that's why like 1-7-30 are so important for us. Sucks. And this one, yeah. Well, we're all pretty familiar with the game, I would assume. But I think a lot of people coming into it for the first time saw things like this and were really taken aback and disappointed and thought that Gigantic had been copying Overwatch. And that's why I called this the Bastion Saga, is because these two characters were compared to each other so much. The colors are different, sure, but they're both robots. They both go into turret mode. They both got like a Gatling gun on one side. They both kind of have the wheels that they can transform into. And man, poor Bastion. But little note on that is, we in like one of the very early trailers, before Overwatch was even announced, HK was in a Gigantic trailer. So technically we had announced HK before Overwatch even existed, as far as people were concerned. But still, because Overwatch came out first, like almost a year before we did, right? It just ended up being like this. And you can see some of the color themes are very similar. Some of the poses, double guns, the orange coloration, the kind of flying and the jets, the snipers, of course, like the stance and the big weapon. And then these two guys, very similar. They're like beasts, and they kind of jump around, and they just have similar poses. And yeah, it sucks. It's just so unfortunate that this had to happen for Gigantic, because like I mentioned before, the characters have very unique shapes, and they're designed in specific ways where a lot of their silhouettes are so unique. And that's actually something that I remember seeing in an early developer diary for Overwatch. They're like, we have this team who's gone over all the silhouettes for each of the characters, so it's easy to tell them in battle. And I actually don't think that that's the case for me playing Overwatch, at least. It's hard for me to tell the difference between some of the characters. But yeah, we'll leave it on that. So, of course, server and region issues. This one I think is really big, where within like a month of the game launching, players in Oceania and Southeast Asia were not able to even find matches. So at one point near the end, we put out a poll and asked people, like, what would you prefer? To have your own isolated server to be able to have lower ping, or would you want everything to be combined so that you can actually find matches? And overwhelmingly people answered, just combine all the servers, just put everybody on one server if you have to, North America, just put everybody here so that they can get matches. What's up, Lynx? How's it going? Good to see you, buddy. Hey, hope you're doing well. And some other things on that were like frequent instability and disconnects, login issues. You can see on the Microsoft forums that there were a lot of these things. This is like login failed for Gigantic. 83 other people had that same problem, and over 2,000 people had viewed this one post alone, which is astronomical. November 4th, 2016 is when I captured that. So this one's pretty old, but that was during the time the game was still alive. So I was trying to use this as an example of things that needed to be changed for the game going forward. Sucks. Hey, what's up, CQ? How's it going? 8 gigs of RAM, we're gonna get to that one. But first, speaking a lot of Xbox and Windows 10 and also Arc and Steam, another thing that I think people don't really think about if you're outside of the game industry, if you're just a player, you don't understand like market share and things like that. So this is the important number right here. 1/3 of the market share or whatever of players had an Xbox, and then 2/3 didn't even have an Xbox of gamers at their home. So that sucks that it was Microsoft exclusive, because you're only able to even tap into 1/3 of the console market. That's very small. And now I don't know what that looks like. I haven't actually looked at these numbers now. It might still be the same. I know that Xbox having a little bit of trouble this console generation again, and I know like PlayStation's really up there this console generation. Nintendo's kicking ass as always, but just like when you see this and you think about the potential audience that could be monetizing on your game, and then you just take 2/3 of that and you throw it out, that's a bummer. That's a lot of lost revenue, a lot of lost players who would potentially be able to play. And then also, of course, the crossplay between platforms was a big deal too, because it was segregated between Windows 10 and Xbox, and then Arc and Steam, which is now fixed for Rampage Edition. So hooray. And also it's on PlayStation. So hooray. Look at that. Oh man, modern times are great. Here we go. The 6 gigs of RAM. So this is a bit of a misnomer. It's actually 8 gigs, because you have to have 6 gigs free to be able to run the game. So operating system takes up some of that, and generally people get like intervals of 2 in some regards. So you either have 8 or like 16 or 6. And so people who had 6 on their computer would not be able to play, even though the game required 6, because the operating system is taking some of that up. So here I took screenshots of these, and I have the dates on that, June 2016 and December 2021. 42% of players in June 2016 were not able to play Gigantic on Steam. 42% of players were not able to play Gigantic on Steam. That's insane. Now, well, like now it's probably, hopefully a lot lower than this, but at least in 2021 or like early 2022, it was down to only 10% of players were not able to play. So just that minimum barrier to entry, people were not able to play Gigantic. You would install the game and then you'd click play and it would tell you you don't meet the minimum requirements. So it wouldn't even prevent you from installing it, which was a huge bummer. But yeah, this sucked. You know, as much as we would do with our marketing efforts, and regardless of what time we launched, And regardless of how people thought about the characters or free to play versus paid or how much it cost or anything, it doesn't even matter. This amount of people weren't even able to play the game. Yeah, that sucks. So it's only like a third of console players, and then, 60% or whatever, just rounding, of PC players were even able to play. Sucks. That seems like that's mostly fixed now, though, just because of this. Regardless of other performance issues and things, just put that aside. And speaking of performance issues, that's a good segue. Yeah, crashing. We've all seen these things. You disconnect and the health bar is just like jacked up for the rest of the time. And then this we saw a lot on Windows 10 and Xbox, where people were just able to see through the geometry. It's a little hard to see probably on here, but if you know what you're looking at, you can just like, there's supposed to be like ramps here, and there's supposed to be a world, and you can just see straight through the geo. Sucks. All right, and this is one that I put quite a bit of time into. Yeah, the low settings. That would happen a lot for low settings too. This is a pretty dense slide. It's got a lot going on here, but this is very true, and fortunately, a lot of these things are now in Rampage Edition, which is fantastic. So thanks to all of you, again, going back to that roundtable, being able to kind of pick your brain on all these things and find out what are some of the things that you think are the most important to put into the game. Here they are, thanks to you. So I have a whole section on this that we'll get to in a little bit. Yeah, this is definitely, it's like a core talk. But I just put this together for my own purposes. This is on my personal account. I did this on my own time over a winter break, over Christmas break in 21. So yeah, all these things, Gigantic was just missing all of these basic features when it launched, and it sort of got some of them. It got custom matches, like 2 major updates in, and it was never finished. It was always in a beta state, and I think it only had 2 of the maps. And it just looked jank. It was never done. It didn't have the polish. It didn't have spectator, no ranked mode, no hero builder. In-game stats were very limited. Detailed profiles that really didn't exist. Retention outside of just like fortune cards. Hero build assist, button rebinds like for console. Colorblind mode, which maybe the game didn't need, but I still thought it'd be important to put in there. Creature loadouts, which were huge, which still aren't in the game, but that's okay. Cosmetic settings, which I think still aren't in Rampage Edition, but that's okay. And achievements, which I believe are going to be in the game because that's on the Steam store page. So cool. But you can just see like some of these things here, like being able to spectate, picks and bans, stuff like detailed statistics, and more hero-specific settings, and all those things just like came with these games out of the box. But those things weren't, it's not in Gigantic. It's too bad. And this one, everybody likes to talk about. It's really 6v6. And I think that is still on the old page for the Steam page for the original Gigantic. That was an interesting idea, no doubt. We were a little bit ahead of the game on some of these things, like this one, heavy reliance on the streamers and influencers. So back in 2016, 2017, when the game launched 3 times, nobody was really utilizing influencers in the way that content creators are utilized now. So big shout outs to the Perfect World community team for actually trying that, because now that is the standard. But back then it was a little bit weird. There was no like baseline for it. People didn't really understand how to utilize it. So you would just pay someone and hope that they would play your game for a certain amount of time. And there was no professionalism. It was still new. People would talk shit about the game. And there were no contracts really that, like the same way that we have contracts now. It was mostly just play the game for this time. So it was like a handshake deal. But fortunately, the industry has evolved a lot, and this has now become the standard for how you go about marketing because Twitch and YouTube are so big, but that just wasn't the case back then. So yeah, it sucks. It was a good idea, just it was too far ahead of its time. And then, of course, like these things, the 6v6, that was a little misrepresentative of the game. These are things that are hard to communicate as well, being more hero than shooter. That's my interpretation of it. Poor product descriptions on there. It's hard to be able to put Gigantic into an elevator pitch. All right, proposed solutions. This is where we get into that juicy shit. So I'm going to take a few slurps here. All right, because we're going to be talking about this a lot. Again, I keep having to reiterate this. This was done on my own time over a winter break for me, thanks to all of you who are watching now. Everybody who had talked to me about Gigantic, particularly people who had joined that roundtable that we did on the private server. This is because of you. I was able to put these slides together and make this coherent and something that I was able to condense and pitch. So thank you for being able to do this. First, this is a title card. This is about onboarding and accessibility. Improving the tutorial. Yep, we went over that, definitely. I asked to remove the 4 tutorial chapters and the bot matches. And I think that came with Rampage Edition. I think that you're put into the tutorial when you launch the game now, right? But I think you can just exit out. That's at least the way it was in the last couple beta tests. So maybe that'll have changed. Hopefully not, because I want to be able to just hop in and start playing. And I'm sure all of you watching will want to do that as well. But yeah, there's one and you can leave. That's it. So cool. Mission accomplished. We got that one done. Next one was about visual clarity. Now I have a couple pictures here. I think these ones are pretty important and those ones didn't get in, but this one kind of did. There used to be lines in like the original that would kind of point you in the right direction, but they didn't really help. I noticed that they had been improved in the most recent beta. So, you know, big shout outs to the Gearbox team and to Abstraction for being able to kind of polish those. I think some of the arrows were pointing the wrong way, but that's okay. That was still a beta. They have time to fix those things, and at least they're in place now. So that's fantastic. But this is also something that they added as well. I think there's pop-ups now. I remember seeing huge prompts that pop up that say, summon now, summon now. And that's in like a lot of their videos too. So it just gives you a little more direction. And I think when you compare Gigantic to MOBAs, where you have creeps that are running straight down the lanes, a player can kind of just run forward or follow the creeps, and eventually they'll hit the objective. But that's not so much the case in Gigantic. Because the maps are bigger, and because they kind of have winding paths, and because there's no creeps to follow, and because towers are moving and trying to fight you, and you have to summon your own towers and all these other things, it's hard to be able to point players in the right direction. So I think these two definitely help with that. So cool. Hey, mission accomplished. We got those ones in as well. And then for these two, I thought it would be cool to have outlines. There's a ton of visual clutter in the game. And being able to show who is friend and foe outside of just the health bar, I think would be really cool. I don't think that made it in, but what I do think is in is when you actually hit somebody with an attack, they flash red now. So there's a little bit more feedback for what's happening. And then of course, like when you're healing somebody, they just get drenched in green goop. They're just like covered in boogers. So I don't know if that's a plus or a minus. They're glowing like radioactive, but hey, at least you're getting some visual feedback for that. This is also something I really like in games. It shows different colors based on friend or foe, and that is sort of in Gigantic, where like if you put down Zenobia's circle, then it shows a blue circle or a red circle based on whether it's friendly or enemy. It doesn't change like the whole thing, so it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, especially on big ass effects. Like if you're stuck in a Beckett focus, do you know if it's friend or foe? I mean, you kind of have to look at your health bar, or maybe you'll just die. But little things like that I thought were really important, so I put those in the deck. But hey, at least we got these couple. All right, hero loadouts. So this is something that personally I don't think is healthy for Gigantic, but I understand that everybody is requesting this, and so I made a little slide for it. And actually, this slide is not very impressive, but it kind of goes to show like, okay, here's a loadout. I think this is from the mobile version of League of Legends. But it's so clear, it's easy to see, right? You could put items here, you could put creatures here, you could put skins or something. So just being able to have a very quick loadout that new players particularly can hop in and not have to worry about all of the other things that are going on in the game, just being able to focus on the action and the combat and figuring out where they're supposed to position and things. That's so important. So you guys all made that very clear to me. And while I didn't have this in any of my previous decks either, I decided to put it in this one, and that was something that mission accomplished. It's in Rampage Edition now, so good shit. I know that people have a lot of questions, and are a little bummed about some of the pre-made builds. But I think it's hard to be able to create a build that's perfect for a new player or for somebody that's going to use one of those builds anyway. Like particularly in Rush, I got to see a lot of the pre-made builds before they got put into the game. And I had a lot of feedback about them, but I figured like it was just too much. And Abstraction's concept for those builds is that they need to have two varying playstyles. So it's kind of like one left path, one right path for most of the builds, but also because they're Rush builds, they also have to have some CC in them or some kind of stop. So that does pose a lot of different problems. How do you create two separate builds that have two very unique identities that also include the CC? So it was challenging, and regardless of whatever you think about the builds, I feel like Abstraction did a fine job with putting those together. In my experience, each of those builds does feel different from the others. So that's cool. And having the builds be scuffed is good because it'll motivate people to switch themselves. That's right. Viva La Cobra. Hey, that's a good assessment. I agree with that as well. And just being able to have custom builds too, so that you can put whatever you want together. Ezrein has no CC. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? He just wasn't built with it. So sucks, but that's the case with some of those heroes. I feel like having pre-made builds kind of hurts some of the parts of the game, like particularly in Clash, because then people will just one track and they won't use the systems that the game gives you. They won't use the tools that the game gives you to be able to create interesting and diverse and varied builds to be able to counter the things that they're facing. And that's my primary disagreement with custom hero builds and being able to set auto upgrades. The game wants you to be able to choose which upgrade path to go based on your situation, based on your comp, based on the enemies, based on whether you're winning or losing. You might choose a different Clash talent. And so having that already set and just automatically upgrade, I think takes a lot of player agency out of the game and a lot of the critical decision making that could potentially turn an entire match around for you. So it's okay. I understand. This is cool. There's I do consider this being in Rampage Edition a big dub. And that's all because of you. So I heard that a lot from people, and I know that people do like to be able to have this, especially starting out. And I believe that there's a way to cancel this too. So you can start with a build, and then you can just cancel it. When you're like halfway through a match, you can say, I want to do this manually now. So awesome. Good on Abstraction for being able to execute on that. It's cool that it functions and it works. And we were all able to play with that in Rush at least. So I would imagine that it's going to be similar in Clash, which is pretty dope. All right, next chapter of our tale, tech issues and improvements. So these were just things that I'm like, here's some stuff that you got to fix before the game goes out. Stable servers, of course, like lag, rubber banding, and desyncs. I mean, we were seeing some of that today, right? And that's just part of the game. It's just ingrained in the, woo bugs all over the place. So little piece of trivia. We were this close to not releasing Wu in the 1.0 version of Gigantic because he was so buggy. The poll created desyncs and lots of problems, and he would just like zip around, and it was such a problem that we identified it as being a non-starter for a lot of players that we were considering just removing it. But fortunately, Motiga said that they would be able to fix it, and they applied a lot of fixes to it. I don't know if it ever got completely patched out, but that time where you would get tongued when you were dodging or in a movement ability, and then you would just be jittering all over the place and you couldn't use your skills and stuff. Yeah, that sucked. There was a period of time where anytime you were facing Wu, you had to just come to the realization and accept your fate that at some point you were just going to be bricked and you would have to die in order to be able to play the game. So yeah, that sucks. And same with Roland, actually. That's one of the primary reasons Roland didn't release. His grappling hook would desync him, and that was a bad feeling. So Wu would do it under certain circumstances. Roland would do it to himself pretty frequently. And I know the team wanted to redo Roland, and we're seeing that now, which is really dope, because Motiga got most of the way through. He had a lot of his skill icons done. He had his new model. I think it was just missing a few textures, and he had like all of his skills working. They weren't balanced. But what we're seeing now out of Abstraction, that's a very different version of Roland. They took him in their own direction, and so cool. Good for them. We'll see how fun he is, but hopefully his grappling hook does not desync him anymore, or anybody else. Debugging, this one's self-explanatory. I just fix some of the shit that's broke. All right. Another slurp before we get into this one. This is the fun stuff. So these are feature additions, more content. First one, I put this first intentionally because this was such a big deal and it was very close to my heart, and I know probably most of you feel very strongly about this as well. Bracketed matchmaking. So I made sure to highlight this. Quick match being separated from ranked mode. So I thought it would be really important to add a ranked mode or at least a competitive bracket because of a lot of the problems that we ran into before. And it sucks being a new player, getting put into your first and second and third game with people who have been playing the game for literal years before the game even launched, right? We had all of the core community coming in, and they would come, even on day one, you have these core players who had been doing this for years, and they already had experience, and they would just mollywop these kids. Like, think about this, like, Xbox free-to-play baby who's just like 7 years old coming in to play this game. He downloads it. You know, his mom is in the doing God knows what, and not monitoring this child. And then he hops into this match, little Timmy. Yeah, and he's playing Ben's Taito. What the hell? That sucks. So we got to find ways to not have that happen again in the future. Fortunately, we're going to be getting a ranked mode. It sounds like it's not going to be there at launch. That's a bummer, but hopefully it's not like a month out. Hopefully it's just a couple weeks. If I had to guess, I don't know anything that's going on there. I would guess that it's probably going to be a month out though. I would like it to be like 2 weeks. I think that that's enough time to get some of the bugs patched and to be able to implement that. But yeah, at least we're getting this. The game used to pair people together based on your MMR. So because there was only one bracket, it would take like somebody who was like 1 MMR and someone who was like 2,000 MMR and average it. So it would put them on a team and then everybody else in the middle. So then you'd have one really good player and one absolute trash tier kid who had never played a video game before, who was using a Little Tikes controller, and they would be on the team with like Flim or Ben or like any of these big guys who would just be able to carry a team. And so that sucks. That makes it a really bad experience because then you have to carry somebody and you have to be good enough to be able to do that to climb. And that also encouraged a lot of smurfing because then you want to be in the middle bracket and you want to have people who are generally in the same tier as you. But if you're too high, then it has to bring somebody who's too low in there to average it out. Or you just had hour-long queues, like I know a lot of the guys from Nimbus and Apex experienced, especially when they were in a stack, because it just would not be able to find a team that had a high enough average to, even combining all these other solo queue players, to be able to make an MMR like that was within a certain range to be able to play against Nimbus in a 5-stack or Apex in a 5-stack. So, sucks. But hey man, we're getting quick match and rank mode at some point, and we're even getting a new casual mode in Rush. So that's great. We have a mode that is designed to be casual, a mode that is designed to be the core experience, but lax, and then a mode that is designed to be sweaty. Awesome. Yeah, Apex had some 4-hour queues, I understood. Yeah, I wonder if Rush will be in ranked as well. That would be 4 different queues though, so we'll have to see. I don't know if the player base would be able to handle that many. I hope it does. I hope a lot of people come back for this, and that's kind of why I'm doing this too, is just to kind of show where we've been and where we're going. Rush better not have ranked. All right. It could be fun, but yeah, it's going to be a little bit wild. Yeah, even 3 queues is a little bit questionable. I hope that we can fill all of those. And also, I think that is kind of a good idea to have ranked coming later and not at launch, because then the people who are able to play on day one are going to get into ranked mode without enough players to be competent enough to be in ranked mode. So at least this way, everybody will be able to play in Clash and get familiar with the systems, find the characters, the heroes they like, unlock some of the heroes even, unlock some new creatures, figure out the game mode, figure out what works for them, and then be able to hop into ranked. So I do think it's good that ranked is coming a little bit later, but we'll see how quick that comes. So yeah, this slide, custom matches. So custom matches were in, but they were in a beta state for the entire life of the game when they were implemented. So this is something I heard from people all the time, being able to do spectator and being able to organize competitive matches and custom modes and just do wonky stuff like we were seeing on this private server today, doing all Svens or something. That's super fun. And then being able to, of course, record that stuff, having a spectator camera to be able to fly around and get the insider scoop on what's happening with each of the teams. And previously, when we were running tournaments, it sucked. We had to have somebody stream, and we would have to capture their stream. So when we had multiple perspectives, we would have to have multiple people streaming and then toggle between all those, and it was just a nightmare. So having something like this, based on what we've seen in some of the videos that have come out from the official source, it looks like there's going to be a way to fight bots, and there's going to be a way to fill with bots, so maybe you can 1v1. And there's also, it seems like there's spectator mode enable, so who knows how that's going to work, but it looks like you can generate a code that you can give to people so that they can hop into your match. So awesome. I'm really glad to see that. I'm excited to try that feature out too. It's going to be a lot of fun. New heroes, of course. Fortunately, we're getting a couple of these boys. Look at how handsome this little lad is. We're getting Kajir finally. He's basically done, right? I think they changed a few of these. This is from the old one, and we'll have to see. But based on some of the videos that we've seen, he seems kind of different. But yeah, of course, Javash. Javash is almost done too. Look at this guy. Man, he looks so sick. And I like his style too. We need a lot more like of these two type characters, but they were just further along. Boomerang and support, Lynx, I'm right there with you, bud. Support was one of my mains for a while. I like just being able to heal bot people. And yeah, Roland, this is what he looked like. I mean, I've shown all of these guys on the final preview stream, and this is it. We got real Roland now. We got real Kajir now. That's so exciting. But I do think Gigantic needs a couple more frontliners, and whether either of these would have been able to perform that role will never be seen, unfortunately. I don't think we're going to be getting new heroes for the game anytime soon. At least that's not what it seems like from the product description. But we can hope, maybe there's a future for Gigantic in some other universe, or maybe there's other things planned for Gigantic. Who knows? Or maybe it's gonna, maybe this version is gonna pop off and there's gonna be millions of dollars of income coming through, and they're just gonna be able to add all these other characters and get Abstraction back or find another developer or something. So, we can hope, but just playing Rampage Edition, giving them our money, that's how we're going to be able to find a future for any of these characters and all the other ones that are listed here. And yeah, hop on that hopium. I know how it is. Yeah, Javash, man. I really thought this character was so cool. But hey, at least we're getting two of them. That's awesome. It's flushing out a little bit of the roster too. It's nice to have another assassin. So hopefully we'll see people pull off of Trip and Woo and actually come to Shadow. And I don't know what his upgrades and stuff are going to look like or how potent he's going to be, but there's an option that maybe he'll be able to actually be a bruiser in some regard, because I know a lot of these skills are still kind of similar, where he has decoys like Voden does. So maybe you can engage with some decoys and just take some fire off of your team. Who knows how that's going to be. And Roland, of course, looks like the nightmare that he used to be. Shotguns and bots and the grappling hook. And yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really cool playing as both of these new guys. And in different ways too. Actually, that reminds me, all of you private server kids, you're going to be playing on a brand new patch. It's like the game is actually getting updated for you. All these different balance changes and things have happened because it's working off of the old, like not the very last build, but the one before that, the last major build. I saw people on like Discord and other places saying that some of the like patches didn't go through. I think there was one patch for Gnosis. I think he had like temp health changes that I think aren't in there, so that's a bummer. But at least the big sweeping changes that we got with the TMAT update all appear to be in there. And those changes also came from the community. We had a little group of people, not core, but I reached out to like Flim and Failco and a few other people, FB, and then I forgot who else. But I just got a bunch of feedback from like select players, like what things do we need to change to try to balance all of the heroes, and they gave us some really good stuff. and then Carter was able to go through and make a lot of big changes. So yeah, that last update made like Zenobia actually decent. It brought her out of trash tier, and it changed Mozu. Also, I think that update got rid of Margrave's throwback because that was broken, so now it's just a launch, which is too bad because I really love throwback attack. And it changed a lot of other things, but yeah, T-Mat will still be broken. T-Mat definitely busted. That character is just too strong. I don't know if she's ever going to get a balance patch either. We'll have to see. If it does well enough, or if people complain loud enough, maybe Abstraction will make some balance changes. And I think that's another element that's cool about the game by ranked mode being a little bit delayed, because maybe there's some time between when the game launches into Rampage 1.0 and when ranked mode launches that there will be bug fixes, balance changes, something. There's a potential that something could happen in that time. So here's hoping. And then here's just some nice to haves that I put in. Player statistics, which we definitely have now. There's a lot more detailed statistics, especially on the match completion screen. So awesome, good stuff. And then the lexicon, I'm not sure this got in. I've seen that there are like other tutorials or something, some other things that are in the game. But I always thought it was a bad look to have players have to go to an external source. You don't want players, especially like Ekbok players, to get out of the game. They probably have their phone in their pocket and they can just pull that out, but you want all of the information about the game to be accessible in the game. That keeps people engaged and that keeps people in, especially when the game's like free to play, you know, and you're trying to bring people in through that method. I know, this is making me want to play too, but we're so close. 3 days, that's right. So this here is something that I put together with the help of a few Motigans. So this was, I think, my first major project at Motiga. I put together all of this information. I gathered all of this through design documents and just from in-game sources. And I created a website. I didn't know how to do that in CSS on the old Art Games page. And so I left it like half done when I moved to Perfect World. And then Evan, Evangelos, and then some of the other people, I don't actually know who else helped, but he said that some other people helped, flushed this out and made it really pretty. And so that's why another reason that I'm so happy that the private server exists is because you guys have articled these things. They're gone now. You can't access this. You know, it's like lost media, but somebody took pictures of them and put them up on the private server, and that's forever where they will live unless the private server goes down, and then they're gone forever. I spent so much time on this and look at how pretty it is. It had tabs, it had like recommended characters. It gave so much information about Clash and about the power and how certain like summoning works and all these things, shields and all sorts of stuff. Not in the wiki? Oh, maybe it's in the wiki. I haven't checked the wiki in a while. But yeah, I know that it's on the private server at least. So ups to you guys on the private server for being able to chronicle these things. And that's probably where those things will live forever. We'll have to go to external sources to get this information. But maybe that's not so bad. It gives a lot of people opportunities to create content and promote their own channels through methods like this. Like there have been a couple of videos that have come out with all of these things, like all the debuffs. So that's cool that people are able to help. But still, it's nice to have that stuff in-game because of how dense Gigantic is. There's just so many things. Even just with these 3, there's so many things that aren't fully explained in the game. So, oh well. It's a fun discovery for players, I hope. All right. So those were all of the things that I pitched to get added to the game, and many of those came from all of you, so thank you for that. These are things that I thought would be a great way to revitalize Gigantic and a way to market it to the existing community and then bring more people in. So you may notice something similar here. I thought it would be a really cool idea to call it Rampage Edition. And I made these mocks of these logos based on the Founders Pack logos. So yes, this was my name. I created Rampage Edition. There was concerns from one of the executives that Midway would not allow this because they own Rampage, the game, right? With the big monsters, and there's a movie for it and everything, but somehow it got through. So yeah, I thought Rampage Edition would be really cool for a couple reasons. It's endemic. It's a term from the game. Also, the edition part of it makes it seem like it is a final, locked-in version of Gigantic. Add all these features, package it together, ship it out. Don't have to worry about it anymore. The talks of live service were long gone. And also, it's like fun. It's chaotic. It's just a really cool, energetic kind of name for an edition of Gigantic. And this is the mock logo that I put together. And there it is, Gigantic Rampage Edition. I didn't know it was going to actually be stuck with that. But speaking of some of those things, here's something else that I worked on, again, in my own time, over a winter break, Christmas break, without anybody at Perfect World or Gearbox asking me to do that. I took a stab at this. I'm not a product manager. I was trying to get into that at my time here, so I was doing this in my own time and trying to really step up and push my own career. But you may notice something about this product description that I don't think has changed a single iota on the Steam product store. I think it's exactly the same as how I wrote it. And I forgot that I did this until I came back to this deck, because I even made fun of this in my last stream because it's such a run-on sentence here. It's like, choose from a diverse roster of unique heroes, each with a set of upgradable abilities, and team up with 4 other players to control objectives and take down the opposing team's mighty guardian, all while protecting your own. And it's just like, that's very amateur because I wrote this, and I think that's still what they've used to this day. So nobody rewrote this, but I put this together. Also, I made a lot of errors here. I didn't capitalize heroes in a couple of these things, and there's just like problems with this. But yeah, that's rolls off the tongue. Sure does. So yeah, this is what they stuck with, a third-person MOBA hero shooter. And then this one, audience targeting, I took a stab at this as well. Looking at this, when I went through and redacted some things, I just kind of clicked through this to see what was here. This actually, I think, is bad. So I made some major mistakes here, and I've learned a lot in my time here in the game industry, and just working on lots of decks and understanding more about how marketing works and stuff. So actually, I would make some pretty big changes with how this works. But I have primary here as hero shooter fans trying to get the Overwatch and Paladins players into Gigantic. And then at the bottom, I have growth as the Battle Royale fans. But actually, I would now, if I were to go back and do this, I would put the Battle Royale fans first. I think Battle Royale is a much larger market that we could pull from. And also, I don't think anywhere on here I have mention of partying up and playing cooperatively, which is something that is very similar to Battle Royale games, right? If you play in teams or duos or trios or whatever, especially in like Apex Legends and Fortnite, that's a big element, a social element of the game, being able to play with others. And so I did not have that in here, unfortunately. But I would have put that up here, and then hero shooter and MOBA, hero shooter / MOBA probably would have been secondary. And then tertiary, I think I would have put Gigantic fans. Still speaking with the core audience, the core is just the Gigantic fans. But yeah, it's interesting to go back and see how I thought of this in the past and how I would change it now. But all of these points I think are still there, and Gigantic hits on each one of these. And you can see sort of the breadth of content and how many different audiences Gigantic is able to capture, because it does hit all of these points. So cool, good game. All right, and as we're rounding this out, this is a slide that was a slice in time. When I had put this together, all of this was pretty relevant. And these are just a bunch of headlines. And I thought that, if we could possibly just package this shit up and get it out the door as quick as we could get in before Overwatch was able to recover. And Lego. Lego partnerships. But still, it was like a bad look for Overwatch at the time. And we could have just slid in, Gigantic, here's a game that's similar to Overwatch, come play us instead, we don't have any of the controversy. But it's just a Gigantic curse that as this game is getting ready to launch, there's other games that are going into betas, like Project Loki or something else. There's a couple other games that are similar to this that are having betas next week, and that sucks because that's going to take market share away from Gigantic. But also that Marvel game that just announced, that's coming out soon, that is just like Overwatch. And so it's like, why? Why couldn't Gigantic just have a clear runway? Yeah, Project Loki's cool, definitely. But yeah, and predecessor as well on her. Thank you. Yeah, Marvel 1 is what it's called, I think. But are you saying the Marvel 1? I thought, what is that thing called? Anyway, and Elden Ring DLC later this year. Yes, Joel, that sucks, man. It's just it's such a dense year. Elden Ring is going to be a black hole for any game. Anything that releases within 2 weeks before Elden Ring and then 3 months after Elden Ring is just not going to exist. It's gone. So that is an unfortunate time where we have a very limited period of this year where Gigantic is going to be able to find legs and be played. And so next week seems like the best time it's got, but it just sucks that Marvel had to announce that, because hopefully people don't see Gigantic and think that it's like an Overwatch or a Marvel clone now, especially since it's coming back. But that sucks. All right, and I think this is the last slide. I put this in a lot of my decks just to remind people that we had a good partnership with Penny Arcade, and they have made 3 panels for us now, 3 web comics for us. There was one that was a couple weeks before this of just their characters playing a game, and I don't think it was featured, but they just like mention it in passing. And then we got one recently of the game coming back, and then of course this is the one that's really prominent that everybody sees. And I always like to look at this every time I come back to it and think about their perspective on this, because they're in Seattle and Motiga was in Seattle, and a bunch of the Motigans actually went and hung out with them. So we had a sponsored session with them that I'm not sure if we paid for or if we just had a partnership, some kind of agreement, but they liked the game so much that they just invited Motiga back. And that's unheard of. They had not done that Penny Arcade made a new one recently, but they had not been doing that with any other games. And that was really special. And so these guys love it, and this is just free promotion. And so I hope that other people see the game, especially Rampage Edition this time around, and start making more content like this. So always more content creators, getting people in and just doing whatever they can to spread the word for the game is really important. And this helped us out a lot. This gave us a lot of visibility. But anyway, I think it's cool to look at what characters they chose, because I think this kind of reflects on their personalities and their play styles. And just the way that they portray Gren here, just looking evil and menacing, but he still looks cool and you kind of want to be part of his team. And then like Sven, he's just captured perfectly. And Zenobia's face right here too. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I saw the official server has an art competition. That's great. It's always fun to encourage people to do those things. And I think that concludes the presentation. Yay! So this was multiple hours of work, like many tens of hours of work, putting all this stuff together and going through over and over again and trying to convey this in ways that I think would be easy to understand and also compelling enough to make an argument for why the game should come back. And yeah, this is in large part thanks to all of you. I would not have been able to do this without a lot of your thoughts and opinions and being able to articulate those things and having these discussions with the players. Again, I keep mentioning that roundtable that I did, like that was a huge catalyst to being able to put all this stuff together and bring Gigantic back. And we're just a couple days away from being able to play it for some hopefully a long amount of time. But as I go through this and we reminisce and I look at a lot of this stuff, I feel like we have a second chance, and there just weren't that many second chances for any games ever. And we have a very unique opportunity to be able to play this, and especially on this slide. I think a lot of people feel like, please bring it back, come back, I'll never forget, miss this game.